a world running on fumes, both literally and figuratively, one man stepped into the noise and whispered a revolution. His name? Stanley Meyer. His mission? To end our dependence on fossil fuels using something so ordinary, it bordered on absurd. Water. Not enriched uranium, not lithium-ion batteries, just water. From the tap, from a puddle, maybe even from a garden hose. At first, it sounded like science fiction, a bedtime story for hippies, but what Meyer claimed, and more importantly, what he demonstrated, was a car that ran not on gasoline, but on a fuel cell that converted water into energy.
An age-old dream becoming a reality. A local inventor has discovered a way, hear this, to use water to run your car.
For a brief, electrifying window in history, he didn't just talk about it. He drove it. He showed the world. And then he died. Abruptly, under mysterious circumstances. You're watching Off the Map. And this is the story of the man who may have solved our energy crisis and was buried with the solution. Stanley Meyer wasn't a Nobel laureate or a corporate-backed innovator. He wasn't a celebrity engineer or a viral TikTok inventor. He was, by most standards, a nobody. Just a man from Ohio with an obsession, a workshop, and a mission. He came of age during the 1970s oil crisis when gas lines stretched for blocks and the world began to understand just how fragile its lifeblood, petroleum, really was. While others ranted or panicked, Stanley rolled up his sleeves. What he proposed wasn't just an invention, it was an act of defiance. He designed a water fuel cell that, according to his claims, split water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen using a process he described as resonant electrolysis. In normal terms, a method so efficient it bypassed traditional energy loss and allowed a combustion engine to run cleanly on the hydrogen gas it produced, with water vapor as exhaust. If true, it would rewrite the physics textbooks. No oil, no pollution, no CO2, no wars for pipelines. It was either the discovery of the century or the greatest hoax since cold fusion. But Meyer wasn't shy about his creation. He didn't hide in the shadows. He filed patents. He gave interviews. He showed off a dune buggy, an actual moving vehicle, that he claimed ran entirely on water. He demonstrated the fuel cell in front of cameras, poured in tap water, turned the key, the engine revved to life. It was messy, primitive, but undeniably real. His appearances sparked curiosity, but also concern. Engineers questioned his math. Journalists looked for the catch. And energy companies, well, they weren't exactly cheering from the sidelines. The idea that someone with a garage full of hardware store parts could disrupt a multi-trillion-dollar oil industry, that wasn't just unlikely. It was dangerous. Still, the attention grew. Military representatives showed up. Investors offered funding. The US Department of Defense reportedly invited Meyer for demonstrations. He became the center of an invisible storm, a tug-of-war between hope and skepticism. And perhaps that's when the clock started ticking. Because revolution is never welcome at the top. What came next was a slow unraveling. Scientists demanded replication, peer-reviewed studies, proof that defied not only expectation, but physics itself. And Meyer didn't provide it. He claimed the patents protected his work, that disclosing the full design would invite theft, sabotage, even assassination. To some, that sounded like paranoia. To others, it sounded like survival instinct. In 1996, 2 investors who had backed him in good faith sued him, alleging fraud. In court, the judge ruled against Meyer. His fuel cell was labeled a scam, a fantasy. And yet, even in the face of legal defeat, Meyer never backed down. He insisted until his final breath that what he had built was real. And then, 2 years later, came the moment that changed everything. March 20th, 1998. Stanley Meyer was having dinner with his brother and 2 Belgian investors at a restaurant in Grove City, Ohio. As the story goes, he took a sip of cranberry juice, stood up suddenly, clutching his throat, and stumbled out into the parking lot. His final words, "They poisoned me." He collapsed and died on the pavement. The autopsy said it was a cerebral aneurysm. But to those who knew him, and to thousands who followed his work, that diagnosis felt too neat, too convenient. No toxicology test, no further investigation. just a quick funeral and a closed file. His brother still believes Stanley was murdered, silenced before his invention could be completed, or worse, before it could be released to the world. And what happened to the invention? The water-powered buggy, the blueprints, the lab notebooks, gone, vanished like smoke in the wind. Some say they were confiscated, others say they were stolen. A few claim they're still hidden somewhere waiting to be discovered, but nothing has ever been verified, just like Stanley Meyer's legacy, suspended in limbo between genius and myth. Since his death, Stanley Meyer has become a folk hero in the corners of the internet. Forums dedicated to alternative energy worship his name. YouTube videos dissect his patent diagrams. Backyard engineers attempt to replicate his fuel cell with spare parts and hope. And always, the same question lingers. What if it was real? What if Stanley Meyer actually cracked the code and someone, somewhere, decided the world wasn't ready? It wouldn't be the first time innovation was buried under profit margins. The history of science is littered with ideas that threatened the wrong pockets and disappeared. From suppressed medical treatments to forgotten energy solutions, it happens more often than we like to admit. Even today, energy monopolies shape global policy. Wars are fought for oil. Economies rise and fall on the price of fuel. In that context, Meyer's invention wasn't just dangerous. It was revolutionary. A threat not just to gasoline, but to the entire architecture of modern power. Some argue that the science behind Meyer's invention was flawed, that the energy required to split water is always more than the energy you get from burning the hydrogen. They point to the laws of thermodynamics as irrefutable barriers. Others insist Meyer discovered a workaround, a method of resonance that traditional science simply hadn't understood. But even skeptics admit something about the whole story doesn't sit right. Maybe it's the missing car. Maybe it's the sudden death. Maybe it's that nagging feeling that when too much money is at stake, the truth rarely floats to the surface. Off the Map doesn't claim to know whether Stanley Meyer was a visionary or a dreamer. But we do know this. For a moment, he made people believe. He made us imagine a world where energy was clean, free, and abundant. Where no child went hungry because fuel prices spiked. Where wars didn't ignite over oil. Where the planet didn't choke on smoke just to keep the lights on. In that sense, Meyer's water car did run, maybe not on roads, but in minds, in imaginations, and in the restless dreams of those who still believe the future could be better, if we're brave enough to build it. So maybe the most dangerous part of Stanley Meyer's story isn't whether the car worked, it's that we believed it could. And maybe that was enough to get him killed. This has been Off the Map. Stay curious, stay questioning, and always listen for the truths they try to bury.